Professor Melly Mail, the Hood Postman. Go on and retweet that vibe, man. You know what I mean? Go on and get that out there, man. There's auditions are being held for you to be yourself. Go ahead and apply within. I'm talking about, you know what I mean? Because my real niggas, my RNs, they know the vibe, man. My NTSDs, niggas that stay down, them niggas know that vibe too. You understand? So, but anyway, I was talking to one of my young comrades, and he's out of New York. His name is Diz. And Diz was explaining to me that because a lot of people question why New York cats, New Jersey, and people all around the country, how are they able to embrace West Coast culture? And he had I think he had a very unique look at why, you know what I mean? And it made sense to me, you know what I mean? And I'm going to give it to you guys and see what you guys do with it. And shout out to Diz, shout out to Qualo, shout out to Grizz, shout out to Bandana Black, shout out to my boy Barzini, and shout out to my boy Big Monster Mac just touched down, and shout out to Cookie Monster out there in New York, in the NY. But anyway, me and Diz was chopping it up, and this is has got to do with relationship. This is show you how relationship work. You know what I mean? Because when you responding, being responsible in responsiveness, and you got that commonality in dialogue and conversation, but people don't understand that only 7% of it is actually words. The other 93% is interaction, working, seeing what you do, liking what you do, embracing what you do, and mirroring, matching one another. Okay? So we're talking about culture, right? So here's what's his thought on this culture. He said, I said, man, so why y'all embrace that? He said, listen, big homie. He said, listen, we embrace West Coast culture, because it was created by us. I know who created it. I know about Raymond. I know about Tookie. Because actually, and let me give you a little history. Actually, they came out here and did a visit, right? And to help educate them on what they were doing, and how did it benefit them or not benefit them. And while they was out here, they learned that it's quite different than what people think, you know what I mean? And you get all these people that try to explain what we do over here in the West Coast, and and try to explain it in a way that's violent. But that's not all true. I mean, there's a violent component to it, yes, but there's much more. Gangbanging is only 5 seconds of most people's lives. You can't stay in that space and continue to be living and breathing and being a community resource, because it goes against the grain. But anyway, we're coming back to, so this is what he explained. He said, at least I know who created it. See, because this culture right here, even though it's destructive, it's our destruction. It's our destruction. He said a lot of people embrace Christianity, Islam, and other things. But when you go crack that book open from cover to cover, there's extreme death from one page to the next. There's so much death in that book, and so much wrong about the book. You know what I mean? And I'm not saying the book is totally wrong. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm saying is that he was explaining that's not my culture. He said, I'd rather embrace something that I'm aware about, I know how it came about. But when you talk about these other things, we know absolutely nothing about it. Everything that we know about religion was given to us by another man. Black people hate everything about religion except for Jesus. The first slave ship that arrived here in 1562 was called the Jesus. And he explained quite well that he'd rather embrace something, at least that he knows where it's out, And I agreed with him, because here's the thing: when the first car was created, I think about a guy named Daimler and Benz, Germans, right? Then Henry Ford comes up with the Model T here in the United States. So what I'm saying, that at some point, people around the world kept adding to the car. Eventually, the car became the car that we drive today, which is virtually almost computer. The whole car, most cars. You understand? So what I'm saying is that when people get something and they see what may be the problem with it, they can always add something good to it to make it a better product. So you can't deny people from wherever they are in the United States or whatever their geographical location is as to determine whether they should be a part of this or not. But if they can add to it and make it more better than what it was, then why not let them embrace it? You know what I'm saying? Because after all, when you think about the Slaussons, the businessmen, the gladiators, and the avenues, at some point they all became social clubs. You understand? But originally they started off as the what was that? What was the white boys over there in Southgate? White boys was in Southgate, Huntington Park, Linwood, and Downey. They was the spook hunters. The spook hunters was out like in the 40s, the 50s, and parts of the 60s. But here's what happened. So when the Slauson, the businessmen, gladiators, and the avenues, their original theology was to protect their neighborhoods, right? They was there to protect their neighborhood. So here comes in 1953, Raymond Washington was born in 1953, right? So if you go back and look, during that time, that's when all these brothers was fighting against the spook hunters who would come across the tracks, because black people weren't even allowed to live across Alameda, because those were strictly where the white people, middle class, upper middle class white people reside at. And black people relatively were in Watts, the west side of Compton, and the east side of LA. So what happened, the spook hunters would come over the tracks and attack black people in their communities and their neighborhoods, and the police that policed those areas wouldn't do absolutely nothing about it. But when the black people went back over to cross the tracks to attack the spook hunters, then the police got involved and attacked the brothers. You understand? So this is the reason why a lot of these what they quote unquote call gangs, but they were just people that wanted to protect their neighborhoods. Everybody wanted to be protected and feel comfortable in their own communities. So Raymond Washington grew up experiencing all these things, right? So when he went to go be a Baby Avenue, he was rejected. So in 1969, he created what is called the Crips, right? So prior to that, you got to understand what was his thinking. He was seeing all this stuff that was going on in his community, seeing everybody else fighting the spook hunters. So the Crips was originally created to protect their community. And that's what they did. But somehow it got misplaced. It got, the thought behind it became, how can I say it? People put their hands in it to change it in a way that wasn't good for the community. And a lot of people that became up to the leadership part didn't know exactly what they were following and what they were doing, because they had the round table. The round table was created by Tom Bradley and others to get these young people, it was the Brims, the Crips, to sit down and talk. But Raymond had an idea that he wanted someone from our community, from the tribe, to sit at the table of the council or the assembly to be part, so we can have a voice in our community at the table. That was one thing he had, right? So by this time, let me back up a little bit. When the 1965 came, and I got a little ahead of myself. 1965 was the Bill of Rights, Civil Rights, right? Civil Rights was an act that gave black people the ability to move across those tracks over there to where the spook hunters reside now, right? So black people started moving in those communities and Basically, the white people that lived there realized that there was a flux of black people coming into these communities, so they started moving out. So by the time Raymond came of age and he created the Crips, the spook hunters was really like none in existence. So there was no one really to fight against it. Then he grew up with a Black Panther, because the Black Panther was there as well in 1968 and 69, right? So he grew up with that mindset. You can't say that whatever he established was originally destructive. Although it became destructive. So when me and the young homie from New York was chopping it up, he understood all this. And that's the point of this conversation that I'm having with you now, is make sure that when people go see, because there's a mental component to all this. When you're reading gives you healing. And lifestyle change also gives you healing. So the Crips and the Bloods and Domos and Keyways and Essays, this is where we must become. We must start to heal. You know what I'm saying? Because all this back and forth, man, it's going to continue to be that. You know, where there's a loss of life, there's a loss of liberty, there's a loss of things that we hope and want to enjoy each and every day of our lives. So going back to Raymond, so now that the spook hunters are non-existent, the civil rights is enacted, and people are moving different ways, and black people, you know what I mean? Because my father himself bought, to use this GI Bill to purchase our home over at Spring Street. We landed in 1968. When we moved there, it was only two black families. We made the third. But by the time 72 rolls around, when everybody started embracing all this other stuff, embracing these tribes, because now the tribes don't have nothing to do. There's no spook hunters, there's nothing. So now these guys start saying Crips don't die, they only multiply, and multiply they did. So the multiplication became, now you got all these different people in all these different areas following something, but there's no real ideology behind it, because the ideology is lost by the time 1973 rolls around, because Raymond Washington is actually in prison. So you got Stanley Tookie Williams, you got Jamel Barnes, you got James Compton, you got all these other individuals, you got Zane, you got just countless of others, just to name a few. Donald Duck Noah, Killer Wayne, you know, guys from over there, Warlock, you know what I mean, just to name a few. I can't name them all. Head Honcho, Mac Thomas, you got all these individuals that's running around trying to figure out what's their ideology. So naturally, when the Crips started spreading, they started spreading east. They spread it west, and they spread it east. So when they spread it east, now you're getting into a whole nother city, which is Compton. Compton, like, wait a minute. We over here. Why should we be part of this? You know what I mean? This is like how the Piru boys became Pirus. You know what I mean? Because they never, you know what I mean? Even though Baba Louie is there, you know, Baba Louie was a Crip, but now he's going to start up a whole nother relationship with these guys over here on Piru Street, right? So now, who do he owe allegiance to? To the guys that he ran with formerly, or to the guys that he lived with now? You know what I mean? And I mean, you know, you can go over here, you can try to rationalize all this stuff, you know what I mean? But when Black Johnny went up to, I think it was Ludus Park, and all these guys, and they had this big old meeting up there with Puddin' and Tam and Gangsta Nate and Vince and Bob Lewis, Sugar Man, and Yellow Ice, or whoever was in attendance, you know. All these guys around, and they trying to listen to Black Johnny from Compton at the time, who later started 4 Trade Crips down in east side of Low Bottoms. Black Johnny think is more or less what these guys doing. He tried to make a mockery out of it. So they had to prove to him that what they were doing was real, and they didn't want to have nothing to do with whatever they was doing, because there's only 2 original gangs that came from Compton: it's the Us Boys and the Pirus. So why should they be followers when they can lead their own path? And this is how the Piru came about. You know what I mean? It was just anti-Crip. They didn't want to be Crips. They didn't have to be. They can make up their own minds about what they want to be or not to be. You understand? You can't fault them for that. But let's get back to my point. My point being is that we have to elevate, educate, and motivate, and just change the wheel. You know, not reinvent the wheel, but make the wheel more better, like they did with the car. So that's where we at. We're in a time right now where we're in the position to change all this stuff, man, and change these youngsters, man. I know these youngsters is consuming a lot of pharmaceuticals and all this different stuff, and their minds are not right, and they believe that in their local thinking, they believe that they are right. They add normal thinking and became normal thinking to them. You know what I mean? But we must, as OGs and triple Gs and all this, we must convince them otherwise. You know, you can't become apathetic to things that you have started. You can't just sit by the sideline and continue to not be that person and say, hey, man, I know I was part of this stuff, but it's time for this stuff to change. It's time for it to heal. It's time for it to get better. And we do this by the relationships. KM videos. Let's talk about KM videos. KM videos is one of the best things that ever happened because it allowed people to continue to come together, communicate, and respond to one another in a cordial and a mannerable way. KM videos allow people, like when me and Kev Mac started linking up, we built we was in continuance. We was in a responsiveness of relationship. He met Better Dog Bruno. He met the guys from Nutty Block. He met Willie Herb from Carver. You know what I'm saying? But all these relationships was started through KM videos. I met all the guys from 6-0, you know what I mean? I met all the guys. I met them brothers down there from Bebop Watts, Big Cool, Little Cool, Kojak, and all them people. You know what I'm saying? I met guys Frogman from Bounty Hunters. This is through relationship. You know what I mean? Through rapport, establishing rapport, mirroring, matching, knowing that we come from the same thing. There's nothing strange about what we do. It's only foreign to those who don't understand it. But tribalness is in our DNA. We can't get away from that. But we can come together and make it better for everyone. We don't have to always be violent. We can look, you know, there's times when we come together, we get big parties or the motorcycle club and the lowrider scene. We be at these picnics. It be both brown, black, and Mexican. You understand? It be damus, keyways, essays. Nothing, and everybody's having a great time. You got music, fuel, you got lowriders, you got women walking around, you know what I mean, looking nice and stuff, you know what I mean. Guys is having a great time, and these things work out. Why can't we continue that across the board? So when a young person from New York looks at this and says he loves this culture, even though it's destructive, but it's our culture. You see, it's not secondary. It's not something fabricated. It's not something where they paint up a white man and put with blue eyes and yellow blonde hair and tell you he's your Lord and Savior. It's not none of that. This is for us, by us. It's like FUBU. You know, I just wanted to share that with you this morning and hope you guys feel this message. Professor Melly Mill, the hood logician, the hood journalist, the hood postman. Remember to get my likes up. Press the notification bell for these notifications come across. And, you know, if you don't like it, press thumbs down. I don't care. But just let me know that you acknowledge it or send me a comment. Let me hear your feelings about this because this stuff is important. It's very important that we get to the bottom of it and change the direction in which it's going and make it more better like they did the car. We ain't still riding around in Model Ts. We riding around in computerized cars. Remember, though, it's Wisdom Wednesday. And take the wisdom, man. You know, take the wisdom, man. You know, auditions are being held for you to find yourself. Apply within. Professor Melly Mel, the Hood Postman. I'm out.